Buen tiro.
I couldn't do that. Could you do that? How can they do that?
They're beginning to get on my nerves. Who are those guys?
Uncommon Sense with the Senior Delinquents.
Welcome to another Uncommon Sense with the Senior Delinquents. I'm sure some of you out there have bought a ticket to kind of a big time sporting event and you paid a lot of money. The ticket prices are high. So you know what? We're going to look at just how much money major stars, major athletes, how they rake it in. And speaking of raking it in, I'm so happy to have raked in my great co-host. You know, I'm in Las Vegas. He's in the Sunshine State of Florida, producer, director, my good friend, Jamie McWilliams. Hi, Jamie.
Hello, Dennis. What a wonderful lead-in.
There is an unbelievable list out there that's mind-blowing how some of these sports are making so much money and some of these athletes are making so much money. They run out of gas continually driving back and forth to the bank to put it in.
Well, you know, Forbes had put together this list, and I saw it in the paper locally, and it opened my eyes in a few areas in terms of the top 100 of who is on that list. And just as surprisingly, how much money each sport rakes in. It's not exactly what I expected. So let's get right into it.
Okay.
Now, you know, and I know now who tops the list. No surprise there, especially since we do a lot of work in the golf industry. Any guesses?
Let me take a shot in the dark. I would say, Tiger Woods?
Yes, and not just by a little bit. We've reached the ceiling up to billionaire area,
Incredible.
$1.6 billion.
Incredible.
Incredible. And number two, and this is not really a surprise, LeBron James. He's trailing Tiger by $500 million.
Wow.
He's around $1 billion raking it in.
You think the Lakers are overpaying him? I do.
Yeah, well, we'll see if another championship comes out of
Yeah,
it. Brady's
true.
done pretty good. But Brady, surprisingly, number 28th on the list. He's only in the 300 plus million category, not chump change.
He has done a lot, but that's very surprising, Jamie, that he is ranked down kind of at the bottom of the top 30.
When you think about what he's accomplished and you think about the two at the top, well, obviously endorsements and other streams of income play a big role. You know, boxing used to be such a big thing. Boom, 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 boom. And the heavyweight fights and all the fights were so much a part of the American scene, but not today as much. Did this surprise you, Dennis, when you looked over the list? Number 3, Lloyd Mayweather. He is just under the billionaire's cap, but that's still a surprise. You wouldn't think that he would be up in that stratosphere with Tiger and LeBron.
They don't call his organization TMT, the money team, for nothing. And number 2, I see him all over town all the time because he lives here in Las Vegas, always around town with his entourage, and he lets you know who he is. But he's a nice guy. He's sharp, but it's still kind of a surprise. Yeah. Jamie, we just went over how much money some of the top athletes make, which is astounding. But how about how much money some of the sports make?
This is where number 1, even though Tiger was number 1 in terms of his personal income, basketball, number 1, and
Wow.
not by a short margin, almost 2-to-1 over number 2, which is soccer. We know that soccer has the biggest international pull. You have to wonder with basketball, how much of it is coming from you know where overseas.
Yes, I would say China. Yes, okay.
Then we have golf. And isn't that something? Because Arnold Palmer continues to make the top 100 list, even though he's deceased because of all of the pretty amazing, right? Maybe like Elvis, you know?
Yeah, I know.
But golf, which Nicholas never had a shot, our player never had a shot because the purses were nothing like today.
Correct.
But golf is now number 3. Interesting because you're not talking about teams, you're talking about individuals. Basically, independent contractors. If you win a PGA event, you're an instant millionaire,
no doubt.
You start looking at other sports, number 4, baseball, then number 5, boxing, still surprising that it draws that big on the big scene. And then it sort of trickles down, tennis, football, which is really just barely making the top 10. How surprising is that? And here's the biggest shocker of all. I thought this might vie for number 1 or 2 or 3, cricket. They're not really drawing the big money. That is a real shocker.
I'm not against people earning money, Jamie, don't misunderstand me. But to be perfectly honest with you, I think most of these guys are way overpaid for what they do. You may disagree. That's my opinion. I'm sorry.
Having looked at this landscape, and I know that you're probably going to beat me up on this again because I'm always looking at ways to make great money, especially when there's so much of it out there in sports. So I have put together a pilot, and I want to show you the promo for a new show that I know could make us multimillionaires.
I love it. I'm ready.
It's time to beat your own brains out. More smash, more cash.
Jamie, I love that. We could make it and we could put it to good use. And speaking of putting it to good use, I think this is a good time for us to step aside, take a short time out, and hear from our sponsor, and that's putting money to good use.
All right.
Pryor, that was very interesting, and some people will talk about how, you know, the money has crossed the line with certain sports, a certain individual. But Jamie, let me ask you, how has the really big money changed athletes in general? How do you feel about that?
Well, we've both had the pleasure of meeting a lot of big athletes,
yes,
even if it may be somewhat superficially. But if you have a little bit more time to spend with them, you really find out that the personalities come out. And what I found tracking it, just because we're old enough to have tracked it, is that at some point in time, a couple things happened. When we were younger, even though I was never a great golfer, I was pretty good. I could kind of relate to, on my good shots, the top tour players, and then my abilities were comparable to them just from time to time. That line in terms of the talent seems to have been crossed. Likewise, I remember when I saw Dr. J, when I was still playing some basketball, swoop down, dunk the ball from the baseline, and I said, we no longer can relate to these people in terms of their athletic ability.
Correct.
When it comes to money, I think there's a little bit of an analogy there in that when the money becomes so great, so huge, the personality aspect of it and the upbringing of the athletes plays a role, because I've seen various athletes like Peter Jacobson, who I've met on numerous occasions, most wonderful guy. He thanks you a lot of times for interviewing him. I've also been shunned by athletes that said, I'm too busy, don't want to bother. That's where it seems that a line's been crossed for a lot of athletes who it seems to me are so insulated with so much money that basically they really lose touch with the general public.
I totally agree. It's hard not to change, Jamie, when you're making that kind of money and you're being surrounded, by you're being insulated almost by your entourage. It's really hard for a person not to change after a while. Some people do it more quickly than others, and I always admire the people that stay the same, that appreciate what they do and what it's gotten them.
But let's be optimistic, because in these rough times, I wanted to end on a really high note. But before I do that, make sure we let our viewers know that there's a way that they can be part of the show.
Absolutely. We'd love to hear from you. You could just simply email us at info@seniordelinquents.com, and we would love to hear from you. I know I would. I know Jamie would.
To end on a positive note, there's a lot of discussion about how much inflation is really going to rip us apart. But I have some great news for you, because the dollar store is finally another victim of inflation, but they're only going from $1 to $1.25.
And what do you mean by that, my good friend Jamie?
You can still buy your bottles of Ripple, and I can still have my martinis. And that's what I'm about to indulge in now.
Oh, I love it. Oh, that looks so good. That looks so good.